I might introduce Megan Finney, who's going to kick us off.
Hello, everyone, and welcome today to one of the first Women in Public Works webinars. I can see that there's some more people joining, so we'll just take this time to do some small introductions just while we sort out some of the technical difficulties in the background as well. If you can't hear any of us, please let us know in the chat, and we can hopefully sort that one out. So my name is Megan Finney, and I'm one of the board directors for the IPWEA New South Wales and ACT. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people as the traditional owners of the lands which I am hosting this webinar from, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I recognise their deep connection to country and value the contribution to caring for and managing the land. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and are joining the webinar from, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participate in the webinar. Now, we have a few people online, so I'd like to start off with, if we could just get everyone to write in the chat box just where you're from, and then we can see, you know, how widespread we're from. So I'm based in Sydney, New South Wales, and the panelists are coming from all different places across the state as well. Just a bit of background for you all. So IPWEA New South Wales and ACT is a division of IPWEA, and that's the Institute of Public Works Engineering Australasia. And each state in Australia has a division as well as New Zealand. IPWEA advocates, supports and promotes public work engineering through advocacy to all levels of government and through industry groups, through training and professional development to their members, and also through events. As part of my role as a director, I chair the Women in Public Works panel, and this is the panel that's brought this webinar today. The Women in Public Works panel is a group of industry representatives that meet every quarter to tackle the challenges facing women in the industry, and we collaborate regularly to initiate, develop and implement projects that will create change within the industry, support women and work towards equality and women in the public works industry. So, like I've said before, one of the initiatives from our panel is this webinar, Reflections on a Career in Local Government. And I'll hand over to Liesl now to introduce the panelists and the rest of the webinar to you. Please enjoy.
Thanks, Megan. So hi, everyone. My name's Liesl Boyd. I'm one of the committee members of the IPWEA Women in Public Works committee, and I'm delighted to be your host today. I would like to introduce our panelists. Unfortunately, one of our panelists is having some technical difficulties. Hopefully she will join us soon. But to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Jackie Kruger, who's a GM at Leeton Shire Council. Welcome, Jackie. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Liesl, and good morning, everyone. And I see there truly is a range of people from all over the state. So I've been GM at Leeton Shire since 2015. Prior to that was at Tamworth Regional Council as the Director of Planning, and before that in New Zealand. And I had my foot in another kind of shoe in New Zealand, because I was on the elected side of council, right in the bottom of New Zealand in a place called Invercargill. Next stop, Antarctica, below that. So had 16 wonderful years there. And then, as you can no doubt tell by my accent, which is not too different to Liesl's and Megan, born and bred in South Africa. And interestingly, started life in nature conservation. So who believes you start life in nature conservation and land up in local government? But it's, for me, a very rewarding career path. And yeah, I look forward to meeting you or talking to everyone or with everyone today.
Thanks, Jackie. That's lovely. Next, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Janet Smith, who joins us. Janet is a senior program specialist and lead facilitator with Women and Leadership Australia. Janet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Liesl. Yes, I've already written in the chat, but I'm in Bowral in New South Wales, and I'm on Gundungurra country. And I just want to say up front, Gundungurra country has been having a lot of technical difficulties in the last few days with the high winds, and so I've had to just reboot. So if I disappear, I'll reappear. but I think most of you around New South Wales have been having some fairly windy problems with and technology. So I'm going to speak to you from two parts of my experience today. Firstly, I'm the lead facilitator at Women Leadership Australia, and so I'll speak about that. But also prior to that, I worked as an academic and a researcher. And I want to acknowledge, though, that I haven't worked in a male-dominated profession myself. Although, that said, in Australian universities, where I've spent the bulk of my career, 50% of academics are women, but only 30% when you get to fellow professors are women. So, as is typical in many workplaces, the numbers look quite good in entry level, and then as you get to more senior positions, it thins out for women. And sadly, that remains the same in a lot of professions. From the Women in Leadership Australia side of things, we offer courses and events for women leaders at all levels, and mainly in women's only groups. And women have shown us that they have a clear preference to do leadership and management programs in women's only spaces because they feel a lot more psychologically safe. And so as a result of my facilitation work at both events and in courses, from public sector and all other sectors too, I hear on a daily basis the women in my programs talk about their experience of being in either male-dominated professions or professions where it's pretty evenly spread, the gender breakdown. Regardless of what it is, I hear examples every day of women just talking about being talked over, mansplained, man-interrupted, bropriating, which is when men appropriate and take credit for women's original ideas. Women expected to take minutes even when they're the most senior person in the room. And so these are the sorts of stories that I hear all the time. And I think, and I'll say more later about the kind of research that I've done into women in the workplace, but I just think that the staggering figure is that 1 in 2 women in Australia experience workplace sexual discrimination, and 1 in 3 women report experiencing workplace sexual harassment. In fact, that figure has just risen in recent times. It's more like about 40%. And of course, apart from being a woman, you're much more likely to experience these sorts of statistics if you're also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, living with a disability, LGBTQI+, etc., etc. And we've come a long way over time in the sorts of issues we're going to discuss today, but we've got a long way to go still. Anyway, I can say more later about the kinds of research that I've done rather than going into it now. Thanks, Liesl.
Fantastic. Thanks, Janet. So our last panelist, Donna, is still having some difficulties. Hopefully she's able to join us soon, but we will kick off the conversation regardless. So Jackie, I'd like to turn to you. You mentioned the variety of the work that you've done in your career. When you think back on your career, have you had many female bosses, and what was your experience like with having female leaders?
Thank you. Interestingly, Liesl, I didn't ever have one direct line manager that was a female.
Wow.
All of my life I've had men, and most of them extremely supportive, I have to say. So I've had a very good and positive experience. But what I have had is in one of my roles it was a social service in New Zealand, I did have a CEO that was a woman, and she was like, she had, my director of operations was a man who reported to her and I reported to him, but she would often pop in, and I found her very approachable, very encouraging. You know, she was someone who had an open door policy and whatnot. And I mean, I didn't abuse the opportunity by sort of like trying to jump anybody else, but certainly made use of the invitation to speak with her directly around policy or strategic matters and whatnot. And it's really very lovely when I suppose other women open the door for you and are very encouraging of your own career development. So that was my experience there. Certainly as a GM, I've got some ladies who are councillors around the council table. And in a way, you could say that they're my bosses, even though I report to the mayor, who's a man. But those women, particularly one of them, also always checking in on your welfare as a GM. Like, everybody just thinks GMs are supposed to be people that, I suppose, can master everything, strive through everything, survive everything. And it's quite nice when there's a woman in a kind of a semi-collegial, but my council is my boss, and she does check in on my well-being, which I find very encouraging as well. But yes, no direct women bosses in my life, and I just hope that as someone who is managing other staff, I hope that I'm able to give back to them what's been afforded to me by these women in my life. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And Janet, what has your experience been like? So you haven't worked in local government as such, but you do work with lots of public servants in your career.
Yes.
What's your experience personally been like in terms of having women bosses?
I would have had about an even number of men and women, to be honest, and I've had good experiences with both, and I've had bad experiences with both. So for me, there hasn't been a gendered pattern there. But this much I would say, that the research shows that women are much more likely to feel let down if a woman is not a great boss. They take it really hard and feel somewhat betrayed. So the sort of cut feels deeper if women have a woman boss, and it's not a good experience. And I think that's understandable. And I think, at Women in Leadership Australia, at our symposiums this year, we had a theme for our panel session on being an ally. And, how do you be an ally for somebody else? What does it really look like in practice? Do you step in if somebody in a meeting cuts you off, overrides you, etc.? And I have to say that on these panels that we had in each of our capital cities and in New Zealand too, there were great examples of both men and women being allies, really having your back. And so I think really at the end of the day, what matters more is that you've got somebody that you report to and is there for you as an ally, who is kind, who has integrity, and who really wants to see equity and equality progressed.
Oh, that's a fantastic point. Thanks, Janet. So often when we are in organisations where it is a male-dominated organisation, like my organisation is predominantly male, and I would assume a lot of the organisations you've worked in, Jackie, would be as well, it can be difficult to find other women to network with, and then to find allies, who might be male or who might be from different areas of and background. Jackie, have you experienced anything like that, and how did you overcome that?
So when you say overcome that, can you just,
I guess,
so you mean, how did we support each other, or what?
Yeah, how did you find sponsors or allies, or from a different gender, from a different background, I guess?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that one of the key things is to find people that you can feel safe with, particularly if you're in an environment where you're needing or in a situation where you want support or advice or whatnot. You want to be with someone that you can kind of tell the story warts and all, and feel safe, and get some advice back from them, and know, as Janet said, that they've got your back. One of the most powerful experiences that I ever had was meeting a lady who was then the Commissioner of Ageing or something in New Zealand, but there was a hydro scheme being developed in the bottom of New Zealand at one period in her life, and it wasn't going so well. So the government of the day tapped her on the shoulder and said, could you please go down to the South Island and fix up this hydro scheme? And anyway, she went to her first meeting and sort of sat in the room, started to get an assessment from everyone on the state of play and all the rest. And she kept hearing about kilowatt hours, and she just listened, you know, very intently. And then took morning tea or something, and we took a break and quickly rang her friend and said, what's a kilowatt hour? So she needed to, she couldn't let her guard down in that particular environment. But she had good friends who had her back, that she knew that if she rang them, they would give her the information and the advice that she needed. She felt safe asking her what she felt was a very stupid or dumb question. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting you shouldn't ask questions in any kind of environment. I find that something that I do quite naturally. I'm not afraid to ask the dumb questions, but I suppose when you've been, you know, zoomed in as she was, you can't exactly arrive as the head of a new hydro scheme and not know what a kilowatt hour is. But I suppose her sharing that story showed her vulnerability, but she didn't crash as a result of it. She made a plan, going to seek support in a safe environment. And it's such a silly little story, but it's always given me courage, that story, that you don't have to know about everything all the time. As long as you've got the will to find out, and you've got people around you that will help share information, it really does make a difference, regardless what environment that you're in. I might have gone a bit off course there, Liesl. But
no, that's fantastic. That's a great story.
The story's really stuck with me for forever, and it makes you not feel intimidated about going into new places.
That's so good. Thanks, Jackie, for sharing that. It reminds me of some of the experiences that I had. So when I worked in local government, I was often the only woman in a room. And I would often have to have meetings with the director of engineering, project managers, engineers, etc. And finding someone to be safe with in there, I did find challenging, but I think the way that I navigated that was just to ask lots of questions, because I think most people like talking about themselves and like showing, you know, their knowledge. And I found that most of the engineers around me were quite happy to share that knowledge if I remained curious and you know, I was asking them lots of questions. And so over time, I think they became allies, and I felt more comfortable sharing some of my personal struggles and personal, you know, asking them questions around leadership, etc., because I built up that rapport. And I think that's a little bit of what you're saying as well.
Yes, absolutely. And what you often find is you ask the questions, and then people say to you in private in morning tea, thank goodness you asked that question, because I didn't know until, you know, it. And so I think that's what I think a good thing is about what women bring to a room, is a greater openness to being vulnerable more quickly than some men. And I think that truly does add value. And I think over time, even when you are the only woman in the room, when you persevere with what the task is, and then you start to deliver results, people soon start to treat you just as one of the team, and you don't feel different. You just feel like you're one of the team. And I think getting there, I was listening to what Janet said earlier about some women's experience, and I'm either blind or I'm very lucky, but I fortunately have not had too much arrogance. I mean, there's been a little bit. I've had a boss once that paid me less than my peers that did the same job, and when I asked him why, he said because they're the breadwinners. And I said, well, how do you know I'm not the breadwinner? And I mean, he was floored by that response. So, you know, that I've had that kind of experience. And then once in New Zealand, the mayor was putting me forward to be the deputy mayor, and one of the councillors stood up and read excerpts from the book on Giuliani, who had been the mayor of New York, and basically said, this is the characteristics of leadership, and you don't have any of those, Jackie, sort of thing. Anyway, luckily he lost. I got made the deputy mayor, and then all you can do is say, well, I'm now going to prove myself. And a couple of years later, after we'd done the first lot of proper strategic planning as leaders around that council table, he took back his words and said, I apologize for what I said at that first meeting. But other than those two rather bizarre experiences, I have generally been in an environment where you're even the only woman in the room, but you don't feel too different too much of the time.
That's excellent. That's good to hear, Jackie. Janet, that sounds like an ideal sort of scenario that that Jackie didn't feel a lot of those things, but that's not what we're seeing in the research a lot of the time, is it? That's sort of not the common situation.
No, it's not the common situation. So maybe I'll just say a little bit about, my PhD was on pursuing a career that's non-traditional for your gender. And so we have lots of jobs that are pretty evenly split. And then we've got the bulk of people, though, work in jobs that are gendered. And examples of that would be in terms of women statistically dominating, obviously nursing, teaching, social work, etc., which are known as the helping professions. And then careers, of course, that you and everyone on this call are really familiar with that tend to be dominated by men would be engineering, mining, armed forces, etc., etc. And then there's groups in the middle, like Commonwealth Public Service or whatever it might be, that are pretty even. So that's what I did my PhD on. What's it like to be either a man or a woman in an area that's traditionally dominated by the other? And the kind of results that I came up with, and by the way, this is many years ago, but I keep abreast of this, and sadly not much has changed. And that is that when men go into traditional women's careers or female-dominated areas, they actually do really well. They're incredibly privileged. They get promoted faster, listened to more, paid more, even if they're doing the same job as sort of Jackie was talking about. And I had a look at a lot of research by someone called Christine Williams, and she called this the glass escalator syndrome, and that is that men are just carried up on a glass escalator in terms of status, position, money, etc., in women's. And so you look at that, and it's the case when men go into, let's say, primary teaching, hey presto, they're principals in no time, etc., as opposed to women. But in contrast, when women go into traditional men's careers or male-dominated areas, they don't do well, and they're usually at risk in all sorts of ways, whether it's psychological safety, promotion opportunities, etc., etc. And there's two really great concepts that I looked at there. One of them you'd all know, and that's the glass ceiling, where women feel as though they just can't progress anymore. They hit this ceiling. But the other one, and I think it's an interesting one, and that is called the glass cliff, and that's named after an Australian, Michelle Ryan named that, who's a professor at ANU. And she just said that women and other minorities in the workplace are more likely to be selected for leadership positions when there's a crisis. And so we've seen that a lot of the initial women premiers in different states and territories only got in because there was a crisis. And so an unkind version of that is that none of the men particularly want it because they can see it's a poison chalice. And so women often are willing to give it a go, partly because it's one of their only opportunities to get those positions. But then they have a really, really rough time. They inherit quite a mess usually, or the glass cliff just sort of shows you can topple over, but sometimes they turn it around too, which is really fabulous. So I think the main thing that we hear about at Women in Leadership Australia, from our panelists and our participants in our programs, etc., is the blokey culture, that it's so hard for women to turn around on their own. And, you know, I referred before to psychological safety, and that's sort of when an individual woman in the workplace, whether or not they feel psychologically safe, which speaks for itself. It doesn't only mean psychologically, it means physically safe, emotionally safe. But then there's also this concept of psychosocial safety, which is at an organisational level. And I think what it means is a blokey culture. We really need other allies to be able to see these things clearly, because sometimes all of us can be like the frog in the hot water heating up. Some of these things, you know, we can just sort of let slip and say maybe when it reaches a level, or maybe when somebody new comes into the organisation, a woman or a man, and says, hey, I've noticed this about the culture. And it sometimes takes a new employee's eyes to see it and name it and really address the sort of psychosocial safety. So, and again, I just want to emphasise while we're on this, all of these things I've been talking about have got a gendered lens that I've talked about now about women, but I just want to say again, you know, I referred to intersectionality in my introduction, but that just means different layers of disadvantage. So we know that, and we have to really, really be allies for other women too, who've got extra layers. And, you know, the layers might be their race, it could be social class background, sexuality, disability, neurodiversity. And I really want to lift up neurodiversity, because when I first started researching about this whole area of disadvantage, neurodiversity wasn't even on our radars. And now we've got such a rich understanding of what it is and what some of the challenges are. And so that's one of the areas that we're now seeing a lot of writing and research about neurodiverse women, let's say, for example, because it looks and shows up quite differently often than neurodiverse men. So anyway, I probably feel as though I've gone off the track a little bit there,
No,
but
that's all good
that's just a little bit
conversation.
from kind of, yeah, my own research background that I think might be helpful. And so in brief, it is a lot harder for women to go into traditional male careers than it is for men to go into traditional female careers.
Thank you, Janet. That's concerning to hear about. I guess when you and I had a chat a couple of weeks ago, we were saying, you know, it's good to celebrate the wins, but it's good to also recognise that we've got a long way to go. So we're just about halfway through our chat this morning. I'm just acknowledging that Donna still is having some issues, unfortunately. Hopefully she'll join us soon. I just wanted to make sure that our participants also know that if you have any questions, you can pop them into the chat. Megan, who is kindly still online with us, is monitoring the chat. So if there's any questions that come out of that, you're welcome to put them in, and Megan will throw them to the panel. So back to our conversation. So, Janet, you mentioned there that it can be more difficult for women in traditionally male-dominated roles. Jackie, as a leader, how are you seeing this play out in your organisation? I'm guessing your council would be much more male-dominated. And how are you going about helping other women around you into the fullness of their careers?
So from Leeton Shire's perspective, you know, we do work on the basis of merit-based recruitment. So we work on the best person for the job, and we don't currently kind of go down any track of any quotas or whatnot, but we're very mindful of the fact that if there is an opportunity to employ a woman who's of, you know, if you've got 2 staff to choose from, particularly in our outdoor teams at councils, very male dominated. We've got 70 staff and only 1 woman on that in the outdoor team. In the office, it's very much 50-50, but certainly with the outdoor groups, it's a different ratio entirely. And we do find that when we have women in the team, it creates I suppose there's a different level of civility between the way people speak with each other and whatnot. And in fact, I spoke recently to our union rep who has greatly welcomed the arrival of this one woman on the team and said that it's he believes it has improved relationships and communication all round within the department. So in terms of within the office, I think that we have an emerging leaders program. So I'm sure IPWEA probably has something similar, but through local government professionals, we have emerging leaders, and we make sure that anyone, whether it's male or female, who has a desire or shows any kind of potential from a leadership point of view, is given every opportunity to grow and develop. So that is clearly number one. We also like very much to invite people to be their authentic self within the organisation. You know, we've got ladies at work that are loud and proud in the way they talk, you know, and do their business, and then we've got other very quietly spoken people that do their work in the background, but they all do marvellous work. And it's about making sure that people are recognised and celebrated for their massive contribution, not only because they're loud, but also the quiet ones. So I think recognising that and recognising people as part of a team really helps to boost and encourage people to develop into their full potential. So those are the kinds of things that we will do in our work environment. We have a newsletter that goes out every month where peers, you know, or the staff within council, it's an internal newsletter for staff, and we find that to be a very useful platform where peers nominate each other, and it's lovely to see women recognised and celebrated by their peers. Yeah, so well, that's in terms of growth and development. If we've had people feeling, I suppose, not feeling so good about being at work or not feeling safe for some reason, we make sure that, you know, HR comes around that person and supports them and supports their manager to support them. And if necessary, we will do some investigations to just help flush out what's really happening, and then help put strategies in place to deal with the matter. So those are the ways directly in the workplace that we'll be investing in our women staff, who are vitally important to the success of our organisation.
Jackie, just on that, we've just had a question come in through the webinar chat on a little bit more information around that Emerging Leaders program. Is that a program that your council runs, or is it run across all local governments in New South Wales?
It's actually through local government professionals. So staff at council, we as a council purchase what's called a bundle, which is the opportunity to have a group of people trained at council, and then we'll nominate, and they go through this Emerging Leaders program, it's probably about 8 or 9 months. They will have 4 or so face-to-face meetings, some online, and then there's a great celebration at the end of the year. But it really is an immersive opportunity to think about, you know, it's not just tailored for one type of career. It's the more generic leadership topics that are covered, which would cover a range of these tricky things, including including some of the things that have been discussed this morning and how to manage them and handle them. But anyway, it is through local government professionals. I was very fortunate to have this is also in New Zealand, I was selected to go on a Leadership New Zealand program. And again, I come back to the directive that they gave, the best of the best. So whether it was a famous film producer or the head of Vodacom in the world that was speaking to us, or the head of the Arunaga, or the Maori organisations in New Zealand, everyone was tasked to come along to be their authentic self and not talk to the leaders with their persona that they give to the general public, but to reveal to the leadership program who they really are on the inside. So often what you see on the outside, the truth underneath is someone's heart will be beating like a drum, like you can't believe, and their tongue will be dry in their mouth. But it's that old scenario of, looking like a duck and paddling like mad underneath. And it's the stories that those people told about their life and their progression and their career, and the truth of it all became really empowering for the rest of us, because you suddenly realize that leadership is really about ordinary people sticking their neck out, and they're as ordinary as the next person. I mean, there are obviously some people that carry huge amounts of charisma and all the rest, but for the bulk of people, it's people that are just prepared to put their hand up and make themselves a bit vulnerable. And so being in that environment where you learn and hear about these real stories really makes it powerful. So I would encourage anyone, if you ever have those opportunities, definitely take them. They expose you to people in circumstances and situations that, I remember one great leader, he had something like 5,000 staff, and he was telling the group, I can control 5,000 staff, but then I go home and I've got a wife and 2 children and I have no authority at home at all. And sort of revealing those sorts of things, I suppose it just shows the normality of who's behind these big roles. Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie. I just wanted to acknowledge that we've just had Donna join us. Thank you so much for joining us, Donna, and apologies that you've had technical difficulties this morning.
So many technical difficulties, thank you, but I'm on now, which is great.
Fantastic. So Donna,
sorry, just to close off that point, I've just had a quick search for the Leaders Program for local government professionals, and I've just added a link to the chat if anyone's interested in that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Megan, for that. I would like Janet to talk a little bit about women in leadership as well. But before we do that, I just wanted to throw to Donna and just get you to introduce yourself, Donna. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And apologies, I'm coming in in late, but I'm Donna Osling. I'm a proud Gomeroi woman from the Gamilaroi Nation. And so a little about me. I'm the Director of Planning and Sustainability at Narrabri Shire Council. In my current portfolio, I'm looking after planning, development, regulatory compliance, tourism, cultural development, and economic development services. So it's a fairly broad and interesting portfolio. And that I've been, working in local government, honing those skills over the last 30 years. And I started in local government by complete accident. I had no idea what I wanted to do post high school. So I went to a career advisor, and he pulled out a dog-eared book around careers in various areas, and he asked me what I liked doing, and I said I like geography and economics, and it was like, oh, okay, there's a town planning course. So I said, okay, I'll sign up and do that town planning course. And off I went to university. I was the first child from a blue-collar family of 2 very hardworking boomers, one of who dad worked away extensively. So we were raised by predominantly my my mum and the rest of the family. Pretty tough journey early in my career. There was a high level of family dysfunction in my household, and I found at that time solace in the library, which was 2 blocks away, and I think that's led to a lifelong love of learning and particularly reading. In my early days, I was incredibly close to my grandfather, Stanley. He was a Aboriginal man, and our family was from Walhollow, a mission near between Tamworth and in Quirindi, part of the hidden generation. He was a colourful racing identity, and really just was a great early support around personal betterment and living a better life than he had led. He was a very, very hard life. My uncle was actually removed from the family, so that gave me a exposure, I guess, to the that experience of the stolen generation. We reunited as a family early in my university career, and that early phases were very challenging in that being the first child from a family that had no one go through university, and many weren't working at all, that had really limited support, had no idea what I wanted how I needed to do university, what that all meant. I managed the first few years to get through with family support. And then the second year, my family fell on hard times, and unfortunately, I had to move out of the accommodation that I was living in, and I had to live in a shed on a mattress that I found on in the back of that shed. So it was quite a stressful time, but managed to work through that. Continue with my studies, and fell into a situation where I had to do work experience at a council. I actually went to the wrong council, so it was an accident. So I did a couple of weeks of work experience, put me on as a trainee, and found the most incredible mentor those 30 years ago that's still my mentor. We speak every couple of weeks, and I think that that personal early hardship really fostered my absolute love of local government, and the fact that it is like a family, and to be there now, providing support to younger people, particularly younger women and women from a diverse background, has been probably one of the most rewarding things about local government. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but such a rewarding one.
Wow, Donna, that's that your story is just a testament to your perseverance. That's just fantastic. Well done for sticking through some pretty tough times and making it through the other side, and empowering others along the way as well. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
And Liesl, can I just chip in that Donna and Narrabri Council, but Donna's played a key role. They've just won 3 prestigious awards with Local Government New South Wales. They absolutely took out the awards in terms of being the council that got the most accolades. So, and Donna had a key part to play in that. So well done, Donna.
Fantastic. Well done, Donna. That's fantastic. You've missed out a couple of bits of the conversation, but we've had sort of discussions around the importance of finding supporters and finding mentors. You touched on your mentor before. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about how you found this person and how that relationship has evolved?
Yeah, sure. One of my early first general managers, and that just touching on what Jackie was saying, that just finding authentic people that care about other people is really has been important. So just finding a mentor that I think reflects your own personal values, and I heard Jackie touch on it earlier as well, in terms of you get a lot of charismatic people that are very outspoken and loud and very dominant in settings, but my own personal leadership style is a collaborative leadership style. I like to bring everyone along on the journey, and I think it's worked really well. I'm trying to look at things with a different lens, focused around staff well-being and happiness, and wanting to be in the workplace, and really understanding what they'd like to get out of being in that work environment. So I think it's important to find mentors that aren't what we colloquially call mudguards, that's shiny on the outside but a little bit crappy underneath. So you're trying to find really authentic people to help guide your career and your own professional and personal aspirations.
Fantastic. And sometimes you find those within your organisation, but sometimes you have to find them outside of your organisation. And Janet, I'd like to throw to you with that. So part of how Women in Leadership do their courses includes, I guess, more of a coaching sort of relationship rather than mentoring. But would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Liesl, for that opportunity to talk about that. So yeah, Women in Leadership Australia, we've got all sorts of courses largely on leadership, but for all levels of leaders. We've got courses for very senior leaders, middle leaders, emerging leaders. We've also got courses on mentoring as well. So, that question about mentoring in and out of the organisation, I just want to say, and I know that Anna has asked that question earlier too, I think ideally to have mentors in your organisation and outside your organisation, both are fabulous. Because the one that's inside understands the dynamics and what's at play in your organisation. But sometimes it's also good to have a mentor from another organisation. They're a little bit more dispassionate and they've got more perspective and distance, and they can bring some really good observations to bear. So the more the better, I think. I talked before about having allies, and there's a big overlap really between what a mentor is and an ally is. But I think that is one of the big success stories. And so organisations like this today, having, again, they don't need to be only women, the allies and mentors, both are fabulous, but still having the sorts of things that you're having today, an opportunity to find peers who are concerned about the same sorts of things is really great. But anyway, back on your question about the courses too. So Women in Leadership Australia has got a special scholarship here for IPWEA or IPWEA members. And I've just put the information about this here in the side bar for you. So please do follow up. I'll also put my email address in case you have any challenges making contact or anything like that. But I'll put that more information there for you. So I don't know, Liesl, did I answer fully enough your question?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I will acknowledge as well that I am undertaking one of the courses with Women in Leadership at the moment, and it is fantastic. So I can certainly vouch for that. And that's how my relationship started with Janet and got her involved today. So thanks again for your time, Janet.
Liesl, can I just ask a question to the panelists? How often should you be meeting with a mentor, or if you have a mentoring relationship, what's the sort of time commitment for that?
I'm happy to jump in there.
Sure.
There's no special time, and some of your mentors you might meet a lot more often with than others. So sometimes some mentors are really quite specialised in how they're mentoring you, and you might only meet with them a couple of times a year, but other mentors you might meet with every week or two. So unlike a coach, where typically if you've got a coach, you meet with them about once a month, but mentoring is much more fluid and sort of case specific. So that's a really vague, but really as much as you need to talk to the mentor. So the mentee should approach the mentor when they really feel the need for some support, perspective, or whatever it is that you need.
Thanks, Janet. That's fantastic. Donna, we haven't spent too much time talking about you. When we caught up before this, we had some great discussions. I'd love you to talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives that you have in your organisation that really came out of your experiences in your leadership and career journey.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work in the diversity space. So I'm fortunate enough to have a really, really diverse team. I've got people from a range of different nationalities, a lot of very female dominated team as well. I have a range of got gay staff, and that creates an environment where there's just such huge opportunities for innovation. And we've been working on a whole range of initiatives around creation of a diversity group. We've established an Aboriginal and First Nations committee where we've had a staff member design our uniform, our Indigenous and First Nations uniform, which has been really exciting. So that was recently launched. We're also working on Aboriginal sister city concepts, a RAP, reconciliation action plan, the innovation plan at the moment. So I've been actively encouraging staff from all of the different portfolios to get together and have sessions around creativity, ideas, and just opening up conversations and looking at things from their perspective that can really add value to programs. So we've had great success in that space. Try and be supportive of those ideas. We have sessions twice a year where the whole team gets together and just celebrates their successes and throws around new ideas. And yesterday we had Wattle Day, for example. We had staff from the library, our biosecurity officers, our Aboriginal liaison officer, our tourism team, regulatory services team, all working together on a community event that had a whole range of perspectives, and was able to bring knowledge out to the community and bring the community along on that journey. It was just such a great event yesterday. In fact, I've still got my Wattle Day earrings on that I purchased yesterday. So yeah, just really trying to encourage and support staff to explore things that they're passionate about, and they may not be in their job description, and you know what, I'm okay with that, but yeah, do what you love.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much, Donna. And I'd love to find out more about Wattle Day. I'm going to Google that when we're finished here. Janet, there's been a question in the chat from one of our attendees around how to encourage more women to male-dominated industries. Have you found anything in your research?
Yes, well, it's really to go back to the whole notion of psychological safety, which, I know that Jackie talked about people being encouraged to show up as their whole self. Well, people only show up as their whole self, and all of that means if they feel safe, if they feel psychologically safe, because it's just too dangerous to do that if there are aspects to your identity that just feel risky to show up. So the organisation has to be clear that they are committed to DEI and people's psychological and psychosocial safety. I also, to go back to the mentoring question, I think mentoring schemes are absolutely essential. So if you're going to have people coming into, let's say, women coming into male-dominated professions, you absolutely must have a formalised mentoring program so that they have designated people to go to talk about some of the things that are really challenging. So yeah, that's, briefly how I'd respond to that. There's a lot more I could say about it, but I think that's just a couple of things for now. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Janet. So, ladies, we are coming to the end of our discussion. It's been fantastic. Just to wrap things up, I would like to throw a question out to all of you in terms of what piece of advice you would give to your younger self if you could talk to them, and acknowledging that some of the attendees to today's meeting will be in early stages of their career. So what's one piece of advice that you might have? Jackie, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is never be afraid of putting your hand up. Don't sit there and underestimate and think twice and think I'm not yet ready for it. Rather just give it a go, jump in the deep end, and remember that people around you are just like yourself. They might give another view on the outside, but inside we're pretty much all similar. And be brave and be bold and do it. There's one other thing that Janet said earlier that just triggered a memory for me. We don't want to be relegated to doing the minutes of every meeting, absolutely. But there's the other side of the story that I found, and that's the power of the pen. And if you're in a committee environment or a group environment, and people are often not really interested in doing the laborious work, sometimes when you offer to do that, you actually have by default more opportunity through what you've written to actually influence the process. So just want to leave people with, don't get relegated to just being the minute taker, but sometimes if you make the best use of that opportunity, you can actually influence the outcome.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a really good change of perspective. Thanks, Jackie.
Power of the pen.
The power of the pen. There you go. Donna, if you had a piece of advice to your younger self or any of the younger people here.
Yeah, I guess it'd be you. There's no one else like you. So your strengths, own them and celebrate them. And it's often common for younger women and professional careers, particularly in male-dominated areas, that that whole imposter syndrome, and don't succumb to the imposter syndrome. You're good enough, and you'll succeed.
Thanks, Donna. And Janet.
Well, that's a coincidence, Donna. I was going to talk about the imposter syndrome too. It comes up in all of our courses all the time, and a lot of the women just say how heavy that is for them, the imposter syndrome. But I think, another similar saying is don't sweat the small stuff. And sometimes when I look back on early stages of my career, I did a lot of sweating the small stuff on things that now, from my perspective, fade into kind of not being the big issues to worry about. But there are still some big issues out there to be concerned about. So it's very hard to know where to put your energy, because there's so much that needs addressing, etc., and in what order. And meanwhile, in all our programs, the women just talk about how much they're juggling with their own families, aging parents, whatever it is, community needs. So I think I'll just go back to that again about the sweating the small stuff. Is the advice would be to sort of try and get the longer view on things instead of being sometimes so consumed about what's happening in the here and now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. All of you ladies, thank you so much again for your time. As we said before, it's easy to get discouraged when we look at what still has to be done in terms of providing equity for women in the workplace, but you've all contributed today to a small step for many of the people who are here today to acknowledge some of the issues, but also to provide help and guidance to some of the others that might be wanting to make their way in their career. So I do thank you again for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us today again. It's been lovely to have the conversation, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Liesl. Appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Nice to meet you, Janet.
Yeah,
You too, Jackie, Donna, everyone. Thanks.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.